And that's The End is Near. In Shadow of the Demon Lord, characters live in the land's last days, on the frontiers of civilization tumbling into ruin, all brought about by the vile cultists in service to an insane and monstrous being eager to claw its way from the void and plunder the world and all its creation for souls. Here death stalks the land. One can hear the gibbering and hooting cries of insane and an unholy chorus in the darkest hours of the night. Rapacious dragons wing overhead, soaring through the skies, while devils, twisted fairies, scuttle out of the depths of hell to tempt mortals into darkness. All these threats and more lie in wait for the unwary and incautious. I'm Nerdarchy Ted.
I'm Nerdarchy Dave.
Welcome to Nerdarchy. For nerds, by nerds.
All right, so today we're going to be talking about another TTRPG, tabletop role-playing game.
That's not D&D.
That is not Dungeons & Dragons. That is correct. We're going to be talking about Shadow of the Demon Lord by Robert J. Schwab, who's done tons of work on other D&D products, and he's been in the industry forever. But you know, he's the primary designer and writer for Shadow of the Demon Lord. It is a complete game in approximately 272 pages.
But if that's not enough, there is plenty of supplemental material that you can get out there. You know, some things are purely digital, some things, you know, are digital, as well as, you know, the print book. So there is a lot that can be gotten for this game. And this was kind of like a rare find. I'd never heard of it until, like, you know, one of the other players in our local group was like, oh yeah, I'll run that for you guys. And I'm like, oh, what is this? And I immediately fell in love with it.
Yeah, so we're going to kind of do like a first impression overview video. There are probably other videos out there on YouTube that are going to dive much deeper than we are going to. But if you're not familiar with it and you're new to it the way we are, we'll hopefully give you enough to kind of give you an idea and expose you to and some of our thoughts on it. Now, there's like one paragraph that pretty much sums up the feel of the game.
And that's The End is Near. In Shadow of the Demon Lord, characters live in the land's last days, on the frontiers of civilization tumbling into ruin, all brought about by the vile cultists in service to an insane and monstrous being eager to claw its way from the void and plunder the world and all its creation for souls. Here death stalks the land. One can hear the gibbering and hooting cries of insane and an unholy chorus in the darkest hours of the night. Rapacious dragons wing overhead, soaring through the skies, while devils, twisted fairies, scuttle out of the depths of hell to tempt mortals into darkness. All these threats and more lie in wait for the unwary and incautious. So, like, you know, some of the chapter headings, like, you know, danger everywhere, you know, just really sells in how vicious this game can kind of be. And you can run it very grim, dark, and incredibly deadly, or you could kind of dial back a little bit and make it be, you know, not quite 5e, but close.
Yeah, that's for sure. So real quick, before we go into the mechanics and how the game works.
If you like this video and the content over on nerdarchy.com and you want to help support us, why not come check us out over on Patreon and support us there?
We drop new content over there for both players and DMs alike for 5e. We make subclasses, races, magic items, spells, feats, you name it. We're probably making it over there. You can check out the card up here, link in the description, and there's even a free download sample so you can try it before you buy it. So for Shadow of the Demon Lord, the basic mechanics are it's a D20, so if you're familiar with D20 games like 5e, this is going to feel very familiar to you. The only dice you need for this game is a D20 and 3d6. And generally how you're going to come up with, you know, what you need is going to be, you're going to roll that D20 and then you're going to add a stat to it. And then you might use something called boons or banes.
Boons and Banes are a fun mechanic that I really enjoy. If you're rolling with a boon, you're going to roll your d6 and add that as a bonus to the roll. If you are rolling with a Bane, you roll your d6 and apply that as a negative to the roll. Now, boons and banes are going to cancel each other out, but if you happen to have multiple boons or multiple banes on a roll, you roll the multiple dice and just choose the higher of the two dice to either apply, if it's in the case of a boon, as a positive to your roll, whereas if it's a bane, you're going to choose the higher of the dice and subtract that from your roll.
So the dice mechanics are super easy. You'll pick them up really quick. There are only 4 fundamental stats that are the prime stats in this game.
So that's going to be strength, agility, intellect, and will.
And they're going to come from your ancestry, which there's nothing really to pick. You just end up getting them. When you're creating your character, you can do a trade-off where you can lower one and raise another. But other than that, there's not a whole lot going on. It's very simplistic.
You know, this I feel adds for a far more streamlined character, as you don't have to figure out, well, do I roll stats or do I take, a standard array? Your ancestry gives you those stats and allow you to kind of make an educated choice as to where you want to go class-wise, which the class mechanics in this system I think are absolutely bonkers and amazing, and we'll get into that as well.
Yeah, and then as you progress, you also will get to increase your stats however you see fit. Now, we have a handful of secondary stats as well.
So there's perception, size, speed, and power.
There's damage, insanity, and corruption.
Now, these things all do sound, pretty self-explanatory. Perception is your ability to perceive the world around you. Size lets you know how much of, how big you are as a creature. Speed is, of course, going to be how much you can be able to move. And power actually links directly towards your ability to cast spells and how many spells you would be able to cast of each particular over the course of a given day.
And then there is defense, insanity, and corruption. Okay, your secondary attributes, they are based off of your ancestries, your fundamental attributes, and the paths you choose in the game, and they're going to determine it. So, even though it seems like there's a lot there, you're just going to record these numbers basically in the beginning, and they're going to start to get tweaked as you go along. So it sounds a lot more overwhelming than it actually is.
Intellect is going to, let you know what your perception is. Strength is going to let you know what your health is, and agility is going to let you know what your defense is. So all of these things just automatically let you correlate to, oh, this is added as a bonus or a negative, and these elements make it really simplistic, and you just fill in these numbers and populate to the next fields.
Yeah, and your ancestry might modify them a little bit. It might tell you to calculate something a little bit different, but even that is always really simple. And also another thing to remember about your stats, they range from 1 to 20, and literally you have a stat and then you have a modifier. It is very D&D like that, but it's even more simplified than D&D because it's 10 minus your stat gives you your bonus if it's a positive or a negative. So +1 through 10 going up, or -1 through 10 going down. Super easy.
Yeah, it's kind of a no-brainer, easy to kind of calculate and figure out. Insanity and corruption, as far as I'm concerned, are always going to start at 0, but
not always. Some ancestries start you with corruption. Just saying, I play an orc.
Sure. Like I said, most of the time, you're going to start off with that, at 0. But things that you do throughout the game, character choices and class choices or path choices, as the case may be, might influence those particular things as well. I know, the magic system is vastly different than what we see for 5e. And there are things that automatically oh, you're going to cast this spell, you're going to get into insanity and corruption pretty quickly.
Yeah, that's actually one of the areas where this game gets a little more complex, is when you get into the magic system. But fortunately, at the very first level, when you first start, you don't have to worry about it, because the game actually goes from level 0 to level 10. And then after every adventure, you're just supposed to level up. There's no XP. There's no milestones. It's super easy. Did you do an adventure? Yes or no? Then you go up, and then you start with your ancestry, and then at first level, you get to pick your novice path. Which your novice path, there's only 4 choices. You can be a warrior, priest, magician, or rogue. The core staple of what fantasy role-playing games, have. It's very easy to pick these things. And then as you gain levels, you're going to choose additional paths, additional information. So at 3rd level, you're going to choose your expert path. And, here you've got essentially 4 times as many choices. And the great part is you don't necessarily have to make something that corresponds with the first choice that you made. Suppose you decide you want to play a character who's a Gish. So you take your magician at 1st level, and then you choose something that's very fightery
At third level, absolutely no problems with this. It's one of the things that I absolutely adore about this system, and it only gets more interesting as you gain further levels. But there's 16 different choices, ranging about 4 of each of them, and that's just within the core book. If you get into supplementary material as well, there are lots more choices that are out there, things related to everything, and even some oddball stuff as well.
I like the fact that you start off, and even like if you're going by the book, I think there's only like 5 or 6 races to choose from, right? So your choices are really limited there. After you pick them, you don't have to pick a lot of things. You're gonna get your race, and then from there you're gonna pick a couple professions. And it might be like you're a hunter, or you were a rebel, or you were a merchant, or
maybe you were a cultist.
Maybe you were a cultist, right? They have no bearings in the game whatsoever mechanically, unless the GM decides at some point that they do, right? Like, they might be like, oh, you're trying to hunt. Give me in order to find your game, give me a perception check, but you can have 1 boon because you are a trained hunter. You have the hunter profession, right? It's one of the very few choices you make at the very beginning when you actually choose your ancestry. And then when you choose your novice path, unless you choose a spellcaster, you don't make any choices, right? And when you make a spellcaster, there isn't as many. So they kind of like really like trickle it in so that you're not being overwhelmed at once. You're getting to play the game a little bit before you have to make a bunch of choices. And then, at third level, when you pick that expert path, then it balloons out, 4 times the number of choices at 16th. And then when you get to 7th level, you're going to get your master path. And that is also 4 times as many choices.
So now it's up to 64 choices, expanding, exponentially, essentially, with all the different things that are there. And again, it's subdivided, just about equally with all of the different choices. So like whether you want to become a paladin or whether you want to become a conjurer or, all of these different things. There's so many great choices. And again, that's just the choices within here. There's plenty of additional supplemental material for you to choose other things that are out there as well.
Now, on your other levels where you're not choosing a path, basically they just increase the abilities you get from your previous choices, your other paths, your ancestry and stuff like that. And typically with those, there's less decisions to make, especially on your ancestry ones. It's usually like you get this set thing or choose a spell, right? So you can always be like flavoring your characters however you want. And so like 2 people can kind of go down a similar path and still end up with very, very different characters.
Yeah, just like you can make 2 fighters that are vastly different, it's very easy to, in D&D, it's very easy to make 2 warrior class characters in Shadow of the Demon Lord that feel and play very differently as well.
So that's like the game in a nutshell, like the overview.
Help I'm in a nutshell.
Yeah. So I guess the question from here is like, what is our experience with playing it? Because I think we're like 3 or 4 sessions in.
Yeah, our characters just leveled up to level 3, so we're getting to choose our expert path. And when I started making this character, I was fairly fleshed out as to where I thought this character was going to go. And based on some different things that wound up happening, I was like, hey, DM, is there an option here to do this eventually? And he's like, well, there's this supplement here that is more of an adventure than a player supplement, but at the end it tacks on this extra expert path that allows you to get a spider companion. I'm like, that's really cool. I want to do that. And I adore my character. I'm playing him for the most part as afraid that the world is trying to destroy him because, well, it's Shadow of the Demon Lord. And we really thought we were all going to die the last session, but I'm having an absolute blast, not only with the novelty of how this game interacts with the way the dice work, with the ability to level up every single session. I'm playing a spellcaster, and the choices that you get to make, it's really refreshing, and yet it's still an aspect of a fantasy RPG, but it is in no way, shape, or form playing D&D.
Yeah, it's a lot simpler, less dice to worry about. Your choices are a little bit more constrained. It's a lot easier. Both me and one of the other players have already lost characters in the game. I believe, was it session 1 or session 2? Session 2.
Yeah, we had gotten to level 1, so it was technically session 2. And, we had rescued this dude who was like almost naked, and we were just trying to help them, and the full moon came out, and this werepossum just totally destroyed our ghoul and then ripped the head off of your clockwork fighter. It was bad.
Yeah, it could have went better. That is for sure. But it's been a lot of fun. It is a little OSR-ish in the sense that you get equipment, and your equipment can have a little bit more meaning in this game, because it's like, well, what can I do with it? In the instance where my character died, I had a uncuttable rope, and I was just Dave the player was convinced if I could just lasso the werepossum that just murdered my friend, and throw it over a tree, I could hang him in a tree until he turned back into a person.
Mm-hmm.
But unfortunately, my rolls weren't so great, and the werepossums were very good. And he opened me up like a tin can and popped my head off like a Rock'em Sock'em robot.
So to quote your own words, the dice just knew.
The dice just knew. So yeah. So therefore, we've changed the way we play a little bit, sort of, but not really, because we almost died again last session. So there is definitely a lot more element to danger in this game than I've ever felt in a 5e game. It might be a little bit closer to the earlier editions, pre-3rd edition of D&D, but it's also a lot of fun. It has some OSR feels to it, but also it doesn't.
Right. So like the elements of, danger, it does really require, it's a test of the players. Are you listening to the DM narration? When that werepossum, went through its transformation, like the word choice reached out, and like I kind of said something like after the fact. I'm like, was that like, were we supposed to realize based on what you just said there that like this was a absolutely terrifying situation and foe, and that we should have had the wherewithal to be like, nah, I'm backing off? Because like half of us did. Three of us decided to like pull back. And the ghoul and the clockwork are like, no, I'm gonna charge in and I'm gonna deal with this, even if like it was to like kind of wrestle him down and what have you. And how quickly he went through those two characters, I'm like, we're gonna die. Like this is over, session 2. What the flip? But we managed to we backed off, and the werepossum kind of backed off.
It ate the ghoul and was happy with that. So yeah, I mean the other player, we knew going in. It wasn't really a surprise per se.
Sure.
But we definitely decided to press our luck, and it did not go well. I do think the other player didn't realize how not well it was going to go so fast, which that was very eye-opening. I fared slightly better and lasted a bit longer, but I just had a series of bad dice rolls, and the GM did not.
Well, I think this thing was rolling with two boons on everything that it was doing. So, like I said, it was we were low-level characters, and this thing was essentially a terrifying foe. It was something that we were supposed to be like, all right, you go do you. We're gonna go this way.
Who knew werepossums were so OP?
This one did not play dead. I'll tell you that much.
No, but it made some of us play dead permanently.
Indeed.
Let us know. Have you played Shadow of the Demon Lord? What do you think? Put your thoughts and ideas down below in the comments and share them with the Nerdarchy community.
While you're down there, don't forget to like, share, subscribe, even click on that notification bell. You know the drill.
Quick reminder, Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays we drop new videos on the channel. Can't wait to them. No worries. We've got you covered. There's a card up here for another time that we talked about Shadow of the Demon Lord. 3 RPGs are better for beginners than Dungeons & Dragons.
So until next time, stay nerdy.